October 8th, 2025 Spokane Plan Commission hearing. Angie, will you take roll, please?
Absolutely. President Bank?
Here.
Vice President Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Edwards is absent. Commissioner Francis?
Here.
Commissioner Lenhart?
Here.
Commissioner Shook?
Here.
Commissioner Tamouche is absent. Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Commissioner Yachts?
Here.
Perfect. We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we have one item on tonight's agenda. Do we have anyone who is online or anyone who'd like to speak in the audience? Okay, so I think given that, we will skip over the Plan Commission hearing procedures because they're not relevant because there's no one here. Single item on the agenda tonight, noticing requirements updates. I believe Spencer Gardner will be presenting virtually, so please take it away.
Hello.
Hi.
Angie, I don't see the presentation up yet.
I'm getting it pulled up here.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I can't be there in person. I'm in Tacoma today. This kind of summarizes the changes that are proposed as what you'll be hearing today. Angie, I'll just have you run the slides, so go ahead and go to the next one. So we set out to address a couple of existing problems in the current code related to providing public notice for a variety of different proposals. So some of the issues we saw, there were sections of code that had duplicate requirements or similar requirements, but sometimes with inconsistencies. The requirements around noticing were scattered in different sections in some cases, and so it wasn't very well organized or clear what requirements applied in which circumstances. And then the noticing requirements specifically for advertising in the newspaper exceeds the requirements in state law, and especially in the current budget environment, the cost of noticing in the newspaper is something that we've been taking a look at. For context, it can be anywhere between $500 to $1,000 or more every time we amend our code just to run the notices in the newspaper. So that cost adds up over the course of a year when you start amending your code frequently, and so caused us to ask what kind of noticing was actually having a positive impact in terms of letting people know what's being proposed and trying to kind of match our noticing requirements with the benefit that they provide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's three different types of changes or I guess practice areas that would be affected by what's proposed here. And the first is project permits. So these don't tend to be related to Plan Commission work. These are plats or building permits that require SEPA noticing in many cases, or in the case of plats, whether it's SEPA or not, certain types of plats can require a notice. So there are some changes specifically to those project permits. The other two are development code amendments and comprehensive plan amendments. So these are typically proposals that come through Plan Commission. Next slide. So first we'll talk about the project permits. And I'll just kind of summarize here. We're proposing to remove newspaper notice from demolition permits and grading permits. There are existing noticing requirements that go beyond the newspaper notice in terms of demolition and grading permits. So there are other avenues that the community can learn about something that's proposed to be demolished or grading that is proposed to occur. We determined the newspaper was not an effective outlet for that, just given the geographic limitations of where the project would be occurring. We're also proposing to change the newspaper notice on plats. State law requires us to notice one time at least 10 days prior to a hearing. Our current code read that you had to notice 2 times on the same day of the week, 2 weeks in a row. And so with that requirement exceeding state law, we decided to propose just basically bringing it in line with what state law requires, which is 10 days prior to the hearing, no later than 10 days prior to the hearing. There were also some situations where the code didn't have any kind of guidance on how to deal with large sites or situations where signage is impractical. A good example that came up in recent history is the proposal to designate 29th Avenue as a pedestrian street. In that particular situation, it was difficult for planning staff to find a property owner who was willing to put a sign on private property, and the right-of-way that was owned by the public was not sufficient to put a sign that didn't either obstruct the sidewalk or obstruct a travel lane for vehicles. So there really wasn't a place to put a sign there, and the code didn't give us a lot of guidance on how to deal with that situation. So we are proposing some language here that would give us better understanding of how to address those situations. Next slide. So when we talk about development code amendments, these are different, of course, from comprehensive plan amendments. The comprehensive plan is the point in time where we're setting policy direction for the city, and then the comprehensive plan or the development code amendments are where we take that policy and then put it into code language. There is a section of code 17G in 17G 025 that lays out the process for those development code amendments. And it includes some references to noticing, but it also points to some other sections. What we've opted to do is to create a new section, 17G 025-020, that includes a summary table of the noticing steps and the requirements, moves some of the noticing provisions from the existing section 010 and moves it into 020, so that all of the noticing and public involvement information related to adoption of a development code amendment exists in a single section. We're also proposing to reduce noticing requirements for proposals that are exempt from SEPA. These tend to be minor code clarifications or changes to administrative processes, and so they just are inherently less impactful in nature. So we're proposing that those be noticed essentially through the noticing process that occurs with the Plan Commission agenda and with the distribution of the City Council agenda. In addition to creating a table that lays out the noticing milestones and requirements, we are proposing to add a table of definitions for the different types of notice. We hope that this helps to clarify when we talk about different types of notice, we're working off of a standard understanding of what type of notice is being discussed, and that type of notice has a more specific description written into that definition table. We are also proposing to remove newspaper notice and to codify current practices that we consider best practices but are not necessarily at the moment written into the code as requirements. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is the version of the table that is in your hearing packet. As you can see, we're identifying specific types of required notice. On the right-hand column, each one of those types of notice is defined in the table of definitions. So when you look at a specific type of notice, you can find in the code a place where it tells you exactly what type of notice that is. The one exception is the Official Gazette. We didn't feel there was a definition needed for that. The Official Gazette is just distributed by the city. And so there wasn't really a need for definition. Next slide, please. So the last type of action that is affected by these changes is comprehensive plan amendments. We took many of the same steps as what we are proposing for our development code amendments and applied it to our comprehensive plan amendments. So for example, we're proposing to add a table of milestones and requirements. into the section dealing with public engagement and noticing. We're proposing to add a definition table and then move any existing noticing requirements from other sections into the new tables that appear in 17G02070. One item to note there, the current code does make reference to providing notice to neighborhood councils, but doesn't really define it or give any additional details. So that is one example of a definition that is added to the table that we hope will improve clarity. And then lastly, we are also proposing to remove newspaper notice on comprehensive plan amendments and implement current practices that we intend to continue but weren't really referenced in the code previously. I believe that is my last slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I did include an example of the noticing table that you'll find in your hearing packet. So again, it's sort of a similar setup. There is a milestone on the left and then the required type of notice on the right. Any notes about the timing or duration of the notice, for example, for a sign that needs to be posted on site, is included in the middle column. And that should be my last slide. I'm sorry, it is not. I don't have the slides in front of me. We do plan to review these changes as we undertake our code rewrite over the next year. So it's possible that there could be additional procedural changes or modifications to this code going forward. But we feel that for now, at least, this improves the clarity and provides some of the needed guidance that was lacking in the code previously. So I am confident that is my last slide.
Very good. Thank you. Questions for Director Gardner? Greg?
Yeah, Spencer, what is the definition that you use for neighborhood council notice?
If Angie wants to put that slide back up. Oh, actually, you know what? That definition is not in that slide. Let me pull it up here. I'm not going to try to share my screen because the Wi-Fi might be is somewhat suspect here, so I don't want to crash things. So give me a minute to pull it up. Okay. So this would be in the section is 17G020070, which we are proposing to rename from notification to public and agency notice and comment. And then table 17G020070-1 is where the definitions are given. And it says neighborhood council notice, and the definition is written notice to neighborhood councils impacted by a proposal, including all neighborhood councils within 600 feet of a site-specific proposal.
And that definition wasn't there previously?
It did make reference to a 600-foot radius. So it's not that the definition wasn't there at all. It's that the definition, there wasn't a single place to go and find descriptions of the types of notice. So I don't think this is really a change to the way that we notice to neighborhood councils so much as it is consolidating all of these noticing types and highlighting the different types. So previously we didn't really have an entry anywhere that said neighborhood council notice. It was just a small snippet of code that said you need to send notice to neighborhood councils. And so it would be easy for somebody to overlook that or miss it because it wasn't in a consolidated place where you could see all the types of notice listed.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question if I can.
Does anyone else have any questions before? Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. Spencer, I remember your suggestion is to cancel all of the notifications in the newspaper. Is that correct?
For development code amendments and for comprehensive plan amendments, yes. for plats, we would continue newspaper noticing, but bring it in line with state law.
Okay. I was wondering, and then for the Gazette, what is the circulation for the Gazette?
Do you mean in terms of numbers or how it is
Yes,
circulated?
please. Numbers.
I don't know the numbers for the circulation of the Gazette. We'd need to get that information from the city clerk's office, but it is distributed, I think, on a weekly basis. And I see Angie nodding her head. So yes, it is distributed on a weekly basis, and it is free and circulated, I believe, by email.
Okay. And do you know how many people that reaches? How many are in there? The reason I'm asking is because I believe the newspaper reaches more people than the in-house or the Gazette and the other method. And the newspaper also goes into other areas and county, even though the internet is, virtually goes everywhere. I think that more people would be more likely to read the newspaper, and they're used to finding out that information in the newspaper. They know where to look for it. I don't know that they would look for it in the Gazette. So I'm just wondering if that would, I think it's another way of keeping us open and transparent to things that are happening in the city, even though it is an extra expense for us.
Understood. I don't know the circulation numbers. I would guess that the spokesman does circulate to a higher number of households. The difference with the Gazette is it circulates to anybody who wants it, essentially. I think you can sign up and receive it. So in theory, everybody could receive the Gazette without any kind of payment, whereas the spokesman requires you to have a subscription.
Right. And I think that my personal opinion is that people who have a subscription for the newspaper and they're interested in knowing what's going on at the city, they're going to look in that section, and I think that it's going to reach more people than the Gazette or any other method that we have or in addition to any other method that we have right now. And I think it also keeps us transparent, as I said before.
Okay, I think we're veering a little bit into deliberation territory here. So one more question from you, Greg, and then we can take a motion.
So Spencer, I'm going to give you a theoretical development, and I want you to tell me what the current noticing requirements would be versus what with all the changes, what the noticing requirements would be. Okay, because I'm pulling from a scenario that we've encountered. So, developer purchases a single-family home, decides to demo that home, subdivide the parcel into multiple parcels, do some grading, and then develop, multiple units across multiple parcels where previously a single-family residence existed. How would, in that scenario, you have a subdivision that's occurring, so I'm assuming that's platting, and some grading, and demolition, and development. Under the current code, how would neighbors and the neighborhood council and anyone else be aware of that work versus under the proposed revisions?
So a lot of this depends on the size of the property. Not all grading permits require newspaper notice. It is only grading permits that require SEPA. So, and that's based on the size. So if you have a typical single-family home lot, I do not think you would trigger the threshold for that noticing requirement. I would have to look at the demolition requirements. I think that is also related to SEPA, and there is a threshold that would not normally be triggered in the case of demolishing like a single-family home. So that would also not typically be noticed under current conditions. And then also the size of the plat would matter. So if a single-family lot, typically that could not be divided into more than, say, 4 or 5 lots. The noticing requirement typically only is triggered if either you've hit SEPA with your plat proposal, or if it's a long plat, which is more than 9 lots. So in a situation where it's a regular single-family home, as you've described, I don't think that there would currently be any kind of noticing involved. Again, that depends on the details. So if it were proposed to instead be multiple apartment buildings, let's say it's a large enough single-family lot, and you exceed the 20-unit threshold that triggers SEPA, you would be noticing today, and you would also be noticing under this proposal via a sign on the site and a written notice to neighbors, and then a notice of the hearing if there is a plat involved that exceeds those 9 lots. Those would all happen in the current circumstances, and they would also happen under what is proposed here. The one difference there would be that if there is a newspaper notice required as part of the plat, it would only be a single newspaper notice instead of 2 notices on consecutive weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Amber?
Hopefully this is a quick question. Is there any plan to notice the updates to the noticing requirements? Like something in the spokesman that says, looking for comp plan updates? Now they're on the Gazette. Sign up here.
We haven't anticipated doing that. I mean, this hearing that we're in today was noticed in the spokesman and also noticed in the Gazette. And the city council hearing will also be noticed in the spokesman and in the Gazette because that is the current requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Spencer? Okay, very good. Angie, do we have anyone online for public comment? Okay. Seeing no one in the room, we will move past public comment and we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we recommend to the City Council the updates to the noticing requirements in SMC Chapter 17G as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So deliberations. Who would like to start? Please go right ahead.
Okay, hearing Commissioner Shook's concerns about catching those folks who rely on the newspaper, I wonder if there would be any willingness to notice the notice updates in the paper, just to direct folks to the Gazette once or twice, in the month following the updates, and then.
So you're saying some sort of notification to the public of this process and that the notification process is going to change and here's what you
Yeah,
do?
just like if you are used to looking for these updates here,
This is where
sign
they're
up
going
for
to
the
be now?
Gazette.
Okay, was Greg first and then
Well,
Ryan?
I think rather than noticing that, I think it would be actually better to have an article in the paper that refers to it. So I think it would be fantastic if the city reached out to, for the local section of the paper and actually discussing it and discuss options for getting that information. Because I know that when I read the paper, I'm not typically looking at the want ad section. I'm not looking at notices, even though I go through the paper quite a bit. I rarely see notices, but I see articles.
Okay, Ryan?
Oh, I was going to basically say the same thing. I agree that the noticing section is in a very, it's a you pay per letter type of section, so they're very brief. And if they're, I mean, a news release would be the easiest way, but it would be nice if there was a reporter who was interested in talking about changing types of communication and go into more depth. I don't know that, any way except for just suggesting that to council staff, that they reach out. But I agree. I think it would be helpful for people to understand, but yeah, it's hard to communicate that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the communication piece from the city is going to be imperative. I'm definitely sensitive to Commissioner Shook's comments about access to information and how broadly distributed that is. But I think there is an opportunity for the city here to be proactive and identify to those people that this information is going to be moving to a new location for what is, in my mind at least, a variety of very reasonable reasons for wanting to do this. And I want to commend staff for taking this perspective and looking critically at some of these things that we just do reflexively, and asking whether it's achieving the intended purposes. But we also have to recognize that the world is a different place and the world needs to be able to be flexible and adapt, and sometimes that requires some changes, and especially if it's costing the city significant dollars, we need to identify those sources and see what else we could do in order to start to close some of that gap. Greg?
Yeah, I think transparency is very important, and I think the more we can do that, the better. I am sensitive to the potential cost issue with the paper, any sort of printed medium, knowing that that's impactful and not necessarily as effective as we might think it would be. I guess one thing, and I should have asked this, but I didn't think about it in advance, is one of the things I don't think we've ever had is on the city's website is a section for notices. And that would be a great avenue for communicating that.
Totally.
Where if it's simply a posting and, there's a triggered notice to everybody that is subscribed to notices, that would be a phenomenal mechanism, and it would be something other than the internal development cost to make it happen, would be free and very, very effective. And I would like to see the city incorporate something like that. And I think that could actually have a far greater impact than the noticing requirements that have previously been in the paper.
Other thoughts? Yeah, I'll just, I guess, conclude by saying, participation in government can't be passive. You can't just be sort of sitting there and expecting the information to be served up to you in the same format without ever having to understand where it is and engage with it, and if there has to be a change, accommodating that change. We need to be active participants, and sometimes that does require change. So I don't see this as an unreasonable proposal, but I do completely agree with all of the comments that there are great opportunities to very, very cheaply create that transparency and create that engagement that don't, for example, have a subscription hurdle, which has all sorts of equity considerations attached to it. So I think this is a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to supporting.
I would say I agree, and I think there's a lot of these things are just the learning, how to use different mediums, but it has the potential for being even more transparent, where, before going and finding a notice in the, want ad section of the paper that's published on the same day, 2 different days. I mean, it's hit or miss whether you're going to find that versus something that is available in a searchable format that is, up for, 30 consecutive days. So I hope that that is a direction and an opportunity that the city is able to take as a result.
Great. So I am going to support this. I do want to say that the concerns about notification, particularly for those without internet service or any sort of email service, is a thought, and how do we keep them notified, and I would like to see, I think there's other avenues for that to potentially occur, like whether community centers print out a notice, because they do probably get the Gazette, and they could print out notices and make them available to their constituents. It could be done in the library. I mean, I think there's a lot of different mechanisms that are outside of the purview of the city to get that information out there. I do have concerns about transparency, but from, I think the scenario that I presented to Spencer, I don't think it's going to sufficiently impact transparency that I can't support it.
Further thoughts? Okay, hearing none. Angie, oh, yes, Carol, please.
I do like the feedback that has been given. I think that if we were going to, I like the idea of being able to phase it out gradually, making the information available in the newspaper. But I don't think we should just stop it immediately, or I think people need to be aware that it's coming, and that they have time to learn how to look for it in other places. And maybe they can run simultaneously, continue to run simultaneously for a while. Maybe say it changes in January, but put the notice out now or something like that, so people can get used to it.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Angie, would you please poll the commission?
So, I have a question.
Sorry.
So how do we add that in the vote, so to speak, that, or do we need to add it in a vote, to whereas the notification comes gradually, or maybe at a certain date?
Well, what I'm wondering is that with this process, it might actually be 90 days before it's actually implemented, because it has to go through us, and then it has to go through city council, and then it has to be approved by the mayor. I think in parallel with that, you know, whether it's reaching out to the paper or whatever and communicating it to the paper and getting an article in the paper, I don't know if, you know, a lot of the codes that when they're passed, they have a time frame for implementation anyway, like a 90 days after passing. I don't know, it might do that.
Well, I suggest that we have an article in the newspaper and have that done as soon as possible, and then let people know that it's coming. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just one article. It can be a couple of articles, maybe a month apart or so. But I think it's important that people know, and you definitely don't want to be accused of not getting the information out to the public.
So is this an opportunity we can include in the findings of fact, a recommendation to city council staff? I mean, it's really only to city council, but that they reach out to notify the public in a meaningful way through print media? Because we can't really make an amendment to the code that would make that happen, and we can't publish something in the newspaper since it's not ours.
Yeah, and we would have to get over the question of support for an amendment as well. I think personally, and that was going to be my recommendation, that this just flow through in the findings of fact, that there be some recommendation that the council insist upon proactive communication to the community about these changes. I would expand it personally beyond just print media. I think the reality is the vast majority of people today don't consume print media. Some still do, certainly, and we'd want to address those folks, but the overwhelming majority of folks today don't, and I think we need to make sure that we include all relevant sources. I love the idea of the website. I think that's fantastic and easy. Initial tooling aside, fantastic and easy and quick. So I think the findings of fact can certainly reflect something of that nature. Is that sufficient?
Add it to the facts and findings?
Yes.
Okay.
Is Mr. Gardner willing to do that? Or unwilling to do it?
Yes, no, that's fine. I have what I need to add it to the findings.
Great, thank you. Jill, I saw you had your hand up briefly. Was that just a twitch, or would you like to add something?
Oh, no, I just want to say that I love that we're streamlining code and reducing burden on the administration and hopefully reducing costs on our city's budget.
Yeah.
And I
agreed.
agree with everything else that everyone's saying, but I thought I'd throw that plug in as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think this is part of a much larger questioning of, are all of the code sections working the way that we would like them to be working, and could they be made more efficient? And I think we are going to see a heck of a lot more than that, of that over the next year and a half. So with that, Angie, please poll the commission.
Commissioner Bank,
Aye.
Vice President Pyerson,
Aye.
Commissioner Francis,
Aye.
Commissioner Lenhart,
Aye.
Commissioner Shook,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Yachts.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Very good. Are there any other comments for the good of the record? And I'll wait, because you gave me some gas last time for not letting you make a comment. So,
No, I made my comments.
okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we're adjourned.